Sarah Mitchell stood at the front desk of the Riverside Police Academy, clutching her training application with sweaty palms. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as she waited for Sergeant Williams to review her paperwork. At 24, she had dreamed of becoming a police officer since childhood, inspired by her father who served the community for 30 years before retiring. The gruff sergeant barely glanced up from her application before shaking his head. His weathered face showed the same dismissive expression she had seen too many times before. Women didn't belong in law enforcement, according to his old-school mentality. The year was 1985, and despite changing times, many departments still operated under outdated beliefs about female capabilities in dangerous situations. "Listen, miss," Williams said, sliding the papers back across the counter. "Police work isn't for ladies. You'd be better off applying to be a school teacher or a nurse. This job requires physical strength and mental toughness that, frankly, women just don't possess." Sarah felt her cheeks burn with frustration, but she kept her voice steady. She had prepared for this moment, knowing that her gender would be questioned before her qualifications. Her college degree in criminal justice, her volunteer work with victim advocacy groups, and her spotless record meant nothing to this man, who saw only her appearance. "Sergeant, I meet all the requirements listed in your recruitment materials. My physical fitness scores exceed the minimum standards, and my academic achievements speak for themselves," she replied calmly, though her heart pounded against her ribs. Williams chuckled and leaned back in his chair. "Requirements on paper don't mean much when you're facing a dangerous criminal in a dark alley. What happens when you need to physically subdue a suspect who's twice your size? What about high-stress situations involving firearms? Women get emotional, under pressure." Other applicants in the waiting area turned to watch the exchange. Some nodded in agreement with the sergeant's words, while others looked uncomfortable but remained silent. Sarah noticed a few female civilians working at desks nearby, their eyes downcast as they pretended not to hear the conversation that affected their own career limitations within the department. The rejection stung more than Sarah expected. She had mentally prepared for obstacles, but facing such blatant discrimination felt like a punch to the stomach. Her father had warned her that not everyone would welcome female officers, but he also taught her to never give up on her dreams without a fight. As she walked toward the exit, Sarah's mind raced with determination rather than defeat. She had spent years preparing for this career path, studying law enforcement procedures, maintaining excellent physical condition, and developing the mental resilience needed for police work. One man's prejudiced opinion wouldn't derail her lifelong ambition. Outside the academy building, Sarah sat in her car and took deep breaths. The autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves, reminding her of hunting trips with her father when she was young. Those expeditions had taught her patience, precision, and respect for firearms, skills that most people assumed she didn't possess based on her gender alone. Her father's voice echoed in her memory from those hunting lessons. "Sarah, shooting isn't about being the strongest or the loudest. It's about focus, breathing, and understanding your equipment. Natural talent combined with dedicated practice beats brute force every time." That evening, Sarah called her father to share the disappointing news. Detective Mitchell listened without interruption, his silence speaking volumes about his own experiences with departmental politics. When she finished explaining the encounter, he remained quiet for several moments. "You know, honey, sometimes you have to prove yourself in ways that shouldn't be necessary," he finally said. "But once you demonstrate your abilities, the doubters either become believers or they at least learn to respect your skills." Sarah spent the following weeks researching alternative paths into law enforcement. She discovered that some departments were more progressive than others, actively recruiting qualified female candidates. However, Riverside remained her first choice because of its excellent reputation and community connection. During her research, she learned about the department's upcoming community demonstration event. Local law enforcement would showcase various aspects of police work to encourage public support and recruitment. The event would include displays of tactical equipment, K-9 demonstrations, and a marksmanship exhibition where citizens could observe officer training procedures. An idea began forming in Sarah's mind, a bold plan that could either open doors or permanently close them. She had always been an exceptional marksman, a skill inherited from her father and honed through years of practice. If the department valued shooting ability as much as they claimed, perhaps she could demonstrate her competence in a public setting that would be difficult to ignore or dismiss. The community event was scheduled for 3 weeks away, giving Sarah time to prepare for what might be her only opportunity to prove herself. She began visiting the local shooting range daily, fine-tuning her accuracy and building the confidence needed for a public demonstration of her abilities. Her plan was risky and unconventional, but Sarah knew that conventional approaches had already failed. Sometimes extraordinary circumstances required extraordinary responses. If Sergeant Williams and his colleagues believed that women couldn't handle firearms under pressure, she would show them exactly what a determined woman could accomplish when given the chance to prove herself. The sharp crack of gunfire echoed across the indoor shooting range as Sarah squeezed the trigger with mechanical precision. 15 rounds downrange, each one finding its target with deadly accuracy. She had been coming here every day for 2 weeks, preparing for the community demonstration that could change everything. Range instructor Tom Martinez watched from behind the safety line, shaking his head in amazement. In his 20 years of teaching marksmanship, he had rarely seen such natural talent combined with relentless dedication. Sarah's groupings were tighter than most police officers he had trained, and her consistency under various conditions was remarkable. "You know, most cops would kill for half your accuracy," Tom said as Sarah reloaded her weapon. "What's driving you to practice this hard?" Sarah explained her situation while keeping her eyes on the target. Tom listened with growing interest, having heard similar stories from other qualified women who faced discrimination in male-dominated fields. His own daughter had struggled to break into firefighting, so he understood the frustration of proving oneself repeatedly. "The community event is your chance to make a statement," Tom agreed. "But you need to be prepared for every possible scenario. They might try to rattle you, change the conditions, or create pressure situations to make you fail." Together, they developed a comprehensive training regimen that went beyond basic marksmanship. Sarah practiced shooting from different positions, standing, kneeling, prone, and from behind cover. She learned to fire accurately while moving, simulating real-world scenarios that police officers might encounter. Tom introduced stress factors into her training sessions. He played loud noises through speakers, had people talk and move around her while she shot, and created time pressure by limiting her shooting windows. Each session pushed Sarah to maintain her accuracy despite increasing distractions and challenges. The most important lesson focused on mental preparation. Tom taught Sarah breathing techniques and visualization exercises used by competitive shooters and military snipers. She learned to control her heart rate, clear her mind of doubt, and maintain focus regardless of external pressure. "Remember, shooting is 90% mental," Tom emphasized during one particularly challenging session. "Your body already knows what to do. Trust your training and don't let anyone intimidate you into second-guessing yourself." Sarah also spent time researching the officers who would be present at the demonstration. She learned about their backgrounds, their shooting records, and their attitudes toward female officers. Sergeant Williams would definitely be there, along with several other instructors and senior staff members. Her father visited the range one afternoon to observe her progress. Detective Mitchell had taught Sarah the fundamentals years earlier, but he was impressed by how much she had improved through dedicated practice. Her stance was perfect, her grip consistent, and her trigger control smooth and deliberate. "You've surpassed my abilities," he admitted with paternal pride. "But remember, this isn't just about proving you can shoot. You're representing every woman who wants to serve in law enforcement. The pressure will be enormous." Sarah understood the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. Success could open doors not just for herself, but for future female applicants. Failure might reinforce existing prejudices and make it even harder for other women to gain acceptance in the department. As the demonstration date approached, Sarah refined her strategy. She would need to volunteer for the marksmanship exhibition, which meant stepping forward in front of the crowd and requesting to participate. The officers might try to discourage her or suggest she wasn't qualified, but she had to persist despite any resistance. She practiced her approach repeatedly, memorizing exactly what she would say and how she would respond to various objections. Confidence would be crucial. Any hesitation or uncertainty would be seized upon as evidence of female inadequacy under pressure. The final week of preparation intensified dramatically. Sarah increased her range time to 3 hours daily, shooting hundreds of rounds and maintaining her accuracy despite fatigue. She practiced with the same type of service weapon used by the police department, ensuring familiarity with every aspect of the firearm. Sleep became difficult as anxiety mixed with anticipation. Sarah found herself visualizing the demonstration, repeatedly imagining every possible scenario and her response to each situation. She practiced her breathing exercises late at night, preparing her mind for the moment when months of preparation would be tested in front of hundreds of people. Her mother expressed concern about the plan's risks, worried that public failure could damage Sarah's reputation and future prospects. However, her father supported the bold approach, recognizing that conventional methods had already proven ineffective against institutional prejudice. "Sometimes you have to make them notice you," Detective Mitchell said during a quiet family dinner. "Your mother's right that there are risks, but doing nothing guarantees failure. At least this way, you're taking control of your own destiny." The night before the demonstration, Sarah cleaned her equipment meticulously and reviewed her mental preparation checklist one final time. She had done everything possible to prepare for this opportunity. Tomorrow would determine whether months of hard work and sacrifice would pay off, or if she would need to find another path toward her law enforcement dreams. She fell asleep clutching the shooting gloves her father had given her years earlier, a tangible reminder of the skills and determination that had brought her to this pivotal moment. Tomorrow she would either prove herself worthy of respect or face another rejection, but this time it would be based on demonstrated performance rather than assumed limitations. The community center parking lot buzzed with activity as families arrived for the police demonstration event. Children pressed against display vehicles while parents chatted with officers about neighborhood safety concerns. Sarah arrived early, parking where she could observe the setup while gathering courage for what lay ahead. Tables displayed various police equipment, radios, handcuffs, protective gear, and educational materials about crime prevention. The K-9 unit had set up an obstacle course where their German Shepherd would demonstrate drug detection and suspect apprehension techniques. Near the back of the lot, officers were preparing the marksmanship exhibition area. Sarah watched as they arranged shooting stations, checked safety barriers, and tested their public address system. Sergeant Williams supervised the setup, barking orders at younger officers while checking his watch impatiently. She recognized several other academy instructors from her research, including Lieutenant Rodriguez, who had a reputation for being more open-minded than his colleagues. Families began gathering around the demonstration areas as the official program started. The police chief welcomed everyone and explained how each display would showcase different aspects of law enforcement work. Sarah felt her pulse quicken as he announced that the marksmanship exhibition would conclude the day's activities. The K-9 demonstration drew enthusiastic applause as the trained dog located hidden contraband and subdued a padded volunteer playing a suspect. Children laughed and cheered, while parents asked questions about police dog training and effectiveness. Sarah barely paid attention, mentally rehearsing her approach for the shooting exhibition. When the marksmanship demonstration began, 5 officers took positions at the firing line. They explained firearm safety rules to the audience before beginning their shooting sequence. Each officer fired at targets placed 25 yards away, their shots grouping reasonably well, but not exceptionally tight. Sergeant Williams served as narrator, explaining how regular marksmanship training ensured officer safety and public protection. He emphasized the physical and mental demands of accurate shooting under stress, clearly implying that such skills required attributes typically associated with male officers. Ladies and gentlemen, accurate shooting requires steady nerves, strong hands, and the ability to make split-second decisions under pressure, Williams announced through his microphone. These skills are essential for protecting our community and ensuring officer survival in dangerous situations. Sarah recognized her cue and stepped forward from the crowd. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her voice remained steady as she addressed the sergeant directly. Every eye in the crowd turned toward her, creating a moment of complete silence except for distant traffic noise. "Sergeant Williams, I'd like to volunteer for the demonstration," she said clearly, ensuring everyone could hear her words. "I believe I can contribute to your presentation about marksmanship skills." Williams looked genuinely surprised, his microphone crackling as he fumbled for a response. He had expected questions from the audience, not a volunteer request from the young woman whose application he had rejected weeks earlier. His initial reaction was to dismiss her politely, but the public setting complicated his usual approach. "Miss, this demonstration requires significant shooting experience and familiarity with police firearms," he replied, trying to sound reasonable while discouraging her participation. "These weapons are quite different from what civilian shooters typically use." Sarah had anticipated this response and came prepared with her answer. She spoke loudly enough for the entire crowd to hear, making it difficult for Williams to refuse without appearing unreasonable or discriminatory in front of families and community leaders. "I understand your concern, Sergeant, but I have extensive experience with this exact type of service weapon. I've been practicing regularly and would appreciate the opportunity to support your educational demonstration." Murmurs rippled through the crowd as people sensed underlying tension in the exchange. Some recognized Sarah from her previous visit to the academy, while others simply wondered why a civilian woman would volunteer for a police shooting demonstration. The moment stretched uncomfortably as Williams considered his options. Lieutenant Rodriguez stepped closer to Williams and spoke quietly in his ear. Sarah couldn't hear their conversation, but she saw Rodriguez gesturing toward the crowd and shaking his head slightly. The lieutenant appeared to be advocating for allowing her participation, possibly recognizing the public relations risk of refusing a reasonable volunteer request. "Very well," Williams finally announced, his reluctance obvious, despite his professional tone. "We'll allow you to participate in our demonstration. However, you'll need to follow all safety protocols and understand that this is a serious exhibition of police training standards." Sarah nodded gratefully and approached the firing line, trying to project confidence despite her racing pulse. One of the officers handed her safety glasses and ear protection while explaining the basic safety rules she already knew by heart. She accepted the equipment graciously, not mentioning her extensive familiarity with range safety procedures. The crowd gathered closer to watch this unexpected development, children asking their parents why a lady was going to shoot with the police officers. Some adults looked skeptical about her chances of success, while others appeared curious to see how she would perform compared to the trained officers. Sergeant Williams handed her a service pistol identical to what the officers had been using. She accepted the weapon with proper respect, immediately checking that it was unloaded before examining its condition. Her professional handling of the firearm impressed several officers who had expected nervous fumbling from a civilian volunteer. "The target is set at 25 yards, Williams explained, pointing downrange at the paper target with its concentric rings. "You'll have 15 rounds to demonstrate your shooting ability. Take your time, focus on safety, and do your best." Sarah stepped up to the firing line, her months of preparation culminating in this single moment. The crowd fell silent as she assumed her shooting stance, the familiar weight of the pistol feeling comfortable in her hands. She had visualized this exact scenario hundreds of times during her training sessions. Taking a deep breath, she focused on the target downrange and began the mental checklist that had become second nature through countless hours of practice. This was her moment to prove that determination and skill mattered more than gender stereotypes, and she was ready to make every shot count. Sarah raised the service pistol, her breathing automatically falling into the rhythm Tom had taught her during training. The familiar weight felt natural in her hands as she aligned the front and rear sights with the target's center ring. The crowd's murmurs faded to background noise as she entered the focused mental state that months of practice had made instinctive. Her first shot rang out with authority, the sound echoing across the parking lot. Through the spotting scope, she could see the bullet hole appearing exactly where she had aimed, dead center in the target's bullseye. A perfect 10-point hit that would have impressed any instructor, but she showed no emotion and prepared for her second shot. The second round followed the first with mechanical precision, punching through the target just millimeters from the initial hole. Sarah's stance remained rock solid, her grip consistent and her trigger control smooth and deliberate. She had entered what competitive shooters call the zone, a state of perfect concentration where everything else ceased to exist except the target and the sight picture. Sergeant Williams watched through binoculars, his skeptical expression gradually changing to one of surprised respect. He had expected adequate shooting from a civilian volunteer, perhaps even decent accuracy that would allow him to offer polite praise before moving on. Instead, he was witnessing marksmanship that exceeded most of his officer's abilities. The third, fourth, and fifth shots continued the pattern of devastating accuracy. Each bullet found the target's center with mathematical precision, creating a grouping that would be the envy of police instructors across the state. The crowd began to realize they were witnessing something exceptional, and excited whispers replaced the earlier skeptical silence. Lieutenant Rodriguez studied the target through his own binoculars, shaking his head in amazement. In his 15 years with the department, he had rarely seen such consistent accuracy under public pressure. The young woman's form was textbook perfect, her breathing controlled, and her follow-through flawless on every shot. Sarah continued, firing with metronomic regularity, each shot finding its mark with unwavering precision. Her 6th, 7th, and 8th rounds joined the growing cluster in the target's center, creating a hole that would be difficult to measure with standard scoring tools. The officers who had performed earlier began glancing at each other with expressions of professional appreciation mixed with embarrassment at their own inferior performance. By the 10th shot, word was spreading through the crowd that something remarkable was happening. Parents pointed out the tight grouping to their children, explaining that this level of shooting was exceptional, even for trained police officers. Camera phones appeared as people began documenting what they sensed was a memorable demonstration. The 11th and 12th shots maintained the incredible standard Sarah had established. Her concentration never wavered, her stance remained perfect, and her sight alignment continued to be precise enough for competitive shooting events. She had transformed the demonstration from a routine display into a masterclass in marksmanship, fundamentals. Sergeant Williams found himself hoping she would miss one of the remaining shots, not out of malice, but because her performance was making his officers look incompetent by comparison. However, his professional integrity prevented him from creating distractions or unfair conditions that might affect her shooting. The 13th shot struck home with the same devastating accuracy as its predecessors. Sarah's breathing remained controlled, her heart rate steady despite the pressure of performing in front of hundreds of people who were now completely silent, except for occasional gasps of appreciation. She had 3 rounds remaining to complete her demonstration. Her 14th shot continued the pattern of perfection, adding another hole to the increasingly ragged center of the target. The grouping was tighter than anything the range had seen during police qualification courses, and several officers were already discussing the implications of what they were witnessing. As Sarah prepared for her final shot, the crowd held its collective breath. She had delivered 14 consecutive bullseyes under public scrutiny, demonstrating a level of skill that surpassed most law enforcement professionals. One more perfect shot would complete a performance that no one present would ever forget. The 15th and final shot cracked across the parking lot with the same authority as the previous 14. Through the spotting scope, observers could see that Sarah had maintained her perfect accuracy to the end, placing her final bullet precisely where she had aimed. 15 shots, 15 perfect hits, creating a single ragged hole in the target's center that would be impossible to replicate. Sarah lowered the pistol and engaged the safety before turning to face the crowd. Her expression remained calm and professional, showing no signs of the nervous energy that had consumed her before the demonstration began. She had accomplished exactly what she had set out to do, proving her capabilities beyond any reasonable doubt. The silence stretched for several seconds before someone began clapping slowly. The applause spread through the crowd like a wave, building to enthusiastic recognition of the extraordinary performance they had just witnessed. Children cheered while their parents shook their heads in amazement at the display of skill. Sergeant Williams approached the firing line to examine the target personally. The evidence was undeniable. 15 consecutive shots grouped so tightly that they created a single hole barely larger than the bullets themselves. It was shooting that would be respectable at a competitive marksmanship event, let alone a casual public demonstration. Outstanding shooting, Williams said quietly, his earlier skepticism replaced by genuine professional respect. I don't think I've seen accuracy like that since my military service. Sarah accepted the compliment graciously while maintaining her composure. Inside, she felt relief and satisfaction at having executed her plan flawlessly. But she knew that the real test would come in how the department responded to her demonstration. She had proven her shooting ability beyond question, but changing institutional attitudes would require more than a single perfect performance. Lieutenant Rodriguez stepped forward to shake her hand, his smile genuine and appreciative. That was exceptional marksmanship under pressure. Have you considered a career in law enforcement? He asked, apparently unaware of her previous application and rejection. The crowd gradually dispersed after Sarah's remarkable performance, but several officers lingered near the shooting area, discussing what they had witnessed. Children asked their parents if police officers always shot that well, while adults continued taking photos of the target with its impossible grouping of 15 consecutive bullseyes. Lieutenant Rodriguez approached Sarah as she returned the safety equipment, his expression thoughtful and genuinely curious. Unlike Sergeant Williams, Rodriguez had built his career on recognizing talent regardless of its source, and he knew exceptional ability when he saw it. Ms. Mitchell, isn't it? He said, remembering her name from the application that had crossed his desk weeks earlier. I believe you submitted an application to our academy recently. That level of marksmanship suggests you have serious training and dedication to police work. Sarah nodded, choosing her words carefully as other officers moved within earshot. This conversation could determine whether her demonstration would lead to real opportunities or simply remain an impressive, but ultimately meaningless display of skill. Yes, Lieutenant. I've been preparing for a law enforcement career for several years. Today's demonstration was my way of showing that I'm serious about serving this community and that I have the skills necessary to be an effective officer. Sergeant Williams rejoined the conversation, still processing what he had witnessed. His decades of experience in law enforcement had taught him to respect exceptional ability, even when it challenged his preconceived notions about who possessed such skills. The target spoke for itself, making arguments about gender capabilities seem hollow and outdated. Where did you learn to shoot like that? Williams asked, his tone notably different from their first encounter weeks earlier. That kind of accuracy doesn't develop overnight, and it certainly doesn't happen without serious training and natural ability. Sarah explained her background briefly, learning fundamentals from her father, years of practice, and intensive recent training with Tom Martinez. She emphasized the discipline and dedication required to maintain such accuracy, drawing parallels to the commitment needed for effective police work. Other officers gathered around, drawn by curiosity about the civilian who had just outshot their entire demonstration team. Detective Murphy, a 20-year veteran, examined the target and whistled appreciatively. He had seen military snipers who couldn't match the grouping Sarah had just produced under public pressure. This is competition-level shooting, Murphy observed, holding the target up to the light to better see the bullet holes. Most of our officers would be happy to group half this tight during qualification courses. Under demonstration pressure with a crowd watching, this is remarkable. The conversation attracted the attention of Police Chief Harrison, who had been mingling with community members near the equipment displays. He approached the group with the relaxed manner of a leader comfortable with his authority, but his expression grew serious as officers explained what had transpired during the marksmanship demonstration. Chief Harrison studied the target carefully, recognizing immediately that he was looking at something exceptional. His years in law enforcement had taught him to value performance over politics, and the evidence before him was undeniable proof of superior marksmanship ability. Ms. Mitchell, I understand you've applied to join our department, the chief said, his tone neutral but attentive. This demonstration certainly suggests you have the shooting skills we value in our officers. Tell me about your other qualifications and your motivation for police work. Sarah seized the opportunity to present her complete profile, her criminal justice degree, her physical fitness scores, her volunteer work with crime victims, and her lifelong commitment to public service. She spoke passionately but professionally about her desire to make a meaningful difference in the community her father had served for 3 decades. The chief listened carefully, occasionally nodding as Sarah described her background and aspirations. He had heard similar presentations from many applicants, but few had backed up their words with such a dramatic demonstration of relevant skills. The combination of academic preparation, physical capability, and proven marksmanship created an impressive overall package. "The academy class begins in 6 weeks, Chief Harrison said after Sarah finished her presentation. "However, I understand your application was not accepted during the initial review process. Perhaps we should reconsider that decision in light of today's demonstration." Sergeant Williams shifted uncomfortably, realizing that his earlier dismissal of Sarah's application was about to be scrutinized by his superiors. He had made his decision based on assumptions rather than evidence, and the target in the chief's hands provided clear proof of his error in judgment. "Sir, I may have been too hasty in my initial assessment," Williams admitted, his professional integrity overcoming his personal discomfort. "Today's performance suggests that Ms. Mitchell deserves serious consideration for academy training." Lieutenant Rodriguez seized the moment to advocate for Sarah's admission, recognizing both her potential value to the department and the positive message her acceptance would send about the organization's commitment to merit-based selection. "Chief, her shooting ability is obvious, but I'm equally impressed by her composure under pressure. She volunteered for a public demonstration, performed flawlessly despite significant stress, and maintained professional demeanor throughout. Those are exactly the qualities we want in our officers." The conversation continued for several more minutes as officers discussed Sarah's performance and qualifications. She listened respectfully while they debated her potential, understanding that this informal discussion might determine her future more than any formal interview process. Parents and children continued to approach, asking questions about the shooting, demonstration, and expressing admiration for Sarah's performance. Their positive reaction wasn't lost on the police leadership, who understood the value of community support and the importance of public perception in modern law enforcement. Chief Harrison made his decision with the decisive authority that had defined his leadership style throughout his career. He looked directly at Sarah, his expression serious but encouraging as he delivered words that would change the trajectory of her life. "Ms. Mitchell, report to the academy Monday morning at 8 o'clock for processing and orientation. Your performance today has earned you a place in the next training class, and I look forward to seeing how you apply this level of dedication to all aspects of police work." Monday morning arrived with autumn sunlight filtering through the windows of the police academy as Sarah stood in formation with 23 other recruits. Her heart raced with excitement and nervousness as Sergeant Williams called roll, his voice carrying none of the dismissive tone from their first encounter. When he called her name, she responded with crisp authority. "Present, sir." The academy training proved more challenging than Sarah had expected, but her months of preparation had built both physical stamina and mental resilience that served her well. Physical training sessions, classroom instruction, and practical exercises filled each day with new challenges that tested every aspect of her commitment to law enforcement. During firearms training, Sarah's exceptional marksmanship quickly became legendary among her classmates and instructors. However, she was careful not to let her shooting ability overshadow her development in other crucial areas of police work. She studied harder than anyone else, mastering legal procedures, investigative techniques, and community relations principles. Tom Martinez visited the academy one afternoon to observe Sarah's progress. The range instructor who had helped prepare her for the community demonstration watched proudly as she instructed struggling classmates in proper shooting fundamentals. Her willingness to share knowledge and help others succeed impressed instructors who valued teamwork over individual achievement. "You're not just succeeding," Tom observed during a break in training. "You're elevating everyone around you. That's the mark of a true leader, not just an exceptional shooter." The academy's academic challenges proved equally important to Sarah's development. She excelled in criminal law, constitutional rights, and investigative procedures, often earning the highest scores on examinations. Her criminal justice degree provided a solid foundation, but her dedication to mastering every detail of police work impressed even veteran instructors. Sergeant Williams became one of Sarah's strongest advocates, having learned to judge performance over preconceptions. He frequently used her target groupings as examples of proper technique during marksmanship classes, and her professional attitude earned his growing respect throughout the training program. Mitchell demonstrates what we want to see in every recruit, Williams told other instructors during an evaluation meeting. Natural ability combined with work ethic and respect for the profession. Her gender is irrelevant compared to her qualifications and character. Physical training sessions initially proved challenging for Sarah, whose smaller size required adapting techniques for restraining larger suspects. However, her instructors worked with her to develop tactics that emphasized leverage, timing, and proper positioning over brute strength. She learned to use physics and psychology rather than muscle to control dangerous situations. Graduation day arrived sooner than anyone expected. Sarah stood with her class as Chief Harrison delivered the keynote address about service, integrity, and community protection. When her name was called to receive her badge and certificate, the applause was notably enthusiastic, including many officers who had witnessed her remarkable demonstration months earlier. Detective Mitchell attended the ceremony, his pride evident as he watched his daughter take the oath of office. The veteran officer who had taught Sarah her first shooting lessons now watched her embark on the career path that had defined his own life for 3 decades. His eyes misted as she raised her right hand and swore to protect and serve. Sarah's first assignment was to the patrol division, where she would work with veteran officers to gain practical experience in community policing. Lieutenant Rodriguez personally selected her training officer, choosing Detective Sandra Torres, a respected 15-year veteran known for her professionalism and skill in handling complex situations. "Your shooting ability got you noticed," Detective Torres explained during their first shift together. "But your success as a police officer will depend on everything else: your judgment, communication skills, compassion for victims, and ability to think clearly under pressure." The first few months on patrol provided daily opportunities for Sarah to apply her academy training to real-world situations. She responded to domestic disputes, traffic accidents, petty crimes, and community concerns with growing confidence and competence. Her careful attention to detail and respectful treatment of all citizens earned praise from supervisors and appreciation from the community. The shooting skills that had opened doors for Sarah became just one tool among many in her law enforcement arsenal. She discovered that being a good police officer required emotional intelligence, cultural sensitivity, and problem-solving abilities that were far more complex than marksmanship fundamentals. During her 6-month evaluation, Chief Harrison noted Sarah's exceptional progress and positive impact on community relations. Her presence on the force had encouraged other qualified women to apply for positions, gradually changing the department's culture and improving its effectiveness in serving diverse populations. "Officer Mitchell has exceeded our expectations in every area," the chief wrote in her evaluation. "Her marksmanship abilities initially brought her to our attention, but her overall performance demonstrates why merit-based selection produces the best officers. She represents the future of professional law enforcement." Years later, Sarah would be promoted through the ranks, eventually becoming a training instructor herself. She never forgot the lesson of her own experience, that talent and determination could overcome prejudice, but only when combined with the courage to prove oneself when opportunities arose. The target from her demonstration day remained mounted on the academy wall, serving as inspiration for future recruits who faced their own challenges and doubts. Beneath it, a small plaque read, "Excellence knows no gender. Officer Sarah Mitchell, Academy record, 15 consecutive bullseyes." Her story became part of department legend, told to new recruits as an example of how extraordinary preparation, meeting opportunity could change not just individual lives but entire institutions. Sarah had proven that when doors were closed, sometimes the best response was to demonstrate so clearly why they should be opened that denial became impossible.